It is also my honor this morning to introduce our keynote speaker, Reverend Ben McBride. Ben McBride is a nationally recognized speaker, author, and strategist known for helping organizations build cultures where everyone belongs. He is the co-founder of the Power Initiative, a capacity-building firm that equips institutions across sectors to foster belonging, bridge across difference, and lead cultural transformation with courage and clarity. With deep roots in public safety reform, community organizing, and faith-based leadership, Ben has spent over 2 decades advancing equity in education, policing, and civic life. His work has supported Fortune 500 companies, school districts, philanthropic collaboratives, and community-based coalitions across the US and in our very own city, previously leading California's largest multiracial, multi-faith organizational network. Ben was named one of the nation's top leaders to watch by the Center for American Progress, and his work has been featured in the Sundance award-winning documentary, The Force. He is the author of Troubling the Water, which outlines a bold framework for fostering belonging in divided times. Ben lives in Northern California with his wife and partner, Janelle, and they are proud parents of 3 daughters. Also following the keynote address will be a time of instrumental and worship reflection for all of us. Please join me in welcoming Reverend Ben McBride, our keynote speaker this morning.
All right, good morning, Seattle. Good morning. All right, it's not too quiet in here. I feel a little bit of energy in the room. You can tell and pick up the sense that this is somewhat of a homecoming, if you will. A lot of people engaging, seeing one another. Maybe through the course of the year, we don't always get the opportunity to intersect. And so feels like it's an important moment, an important room for us to be in as we hold space together. I'm going to give you 4 invitations this morning, really around the notion of how do we lean into the beloved community, and more so, how do we live into what common hymnal was inviting us, which was to be love in a very difficult time. Dr. King said that love is the only cement that can hold this broken community together. And when I am commanded to love, I'm commanded to restore community, to resist injustice, and to meet the needs of my brothers and sisters. You know, I was in Johannesburg, South Africa, last year, February, and I was asked a really provocative question, at least it was provocative to me, which was they asked us to look 75 years into the future, to the year 2100. And to imagine what that world would look like, how it would become more just, how it would become more right, how it would become more liberated. And they asked us to think about what was the leadership that we were offering in the current moment going to contribute to this new world in the year 2100. But when I began to think about that, instead of looking into the future, I actually looked into the rear view of our past, which was 75 years before me, when Dr. King was a 20-year-old student at Boston University. Yes, sir. And he was actually sitting there imagining the very room that we are sitting in. He was imagining a world that could be more just, that could be more fair, a world in which everyone, regardless of not just their difference, but also what they have in conflict, would be able to occupy space and see and resonate with the humanness of one another amidst that conflict. And many don't always lean into the reality that Dr. King didn't necessarily want to be a pastor. At Boston University, he was trying to figure out what should be his road. And he chose pastoring because he felt that it would be the good intersection for him to be able to manifest this idea of beloved community. So he said, I'm going to have to earn my way into a pretty large church that's well-resourced, that will give me the platform to live into my reality. And so he accepted a pastorate at a startup church in his plan called Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery. Now, many don't always know that the reason he was hired at Dexter Avenue is because they had a pastor named Vernon Johns, who was the pastor, but the church was a silk stocking church, meaning it was the church where the professional collided with the working class. And they said that Dr. Johns talked too bad to the white folks in town. So they said, we're going to get rid of Vernon Johns and get us a nice, safe minister who will help us accomplish what we're trying to do. And they hired the good Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But Dr. King doesn't become the Dr. King that we know without Joanne Robinson. Would you say her name in the space? Say Joanne Robinson. Joanne Robinson was a black woman in this church who was also the leader of the Women's Political Council, who even before the days that we know of Rosa Parks and her moment on Montgomery's buses, have been organizing black women in the city because of the treatment, the harsh, unjust treatment that they have been experiencing. It was Joanne Robinson who stayed up all night with 2 college students on a mimeograph and made over 50,000 leaflet copies to organize the first day of the Montgomery bus boycott. And it was only because of the culture of misogyny and sexism that she said, well, now after they were able to keep everybody off the buses for a day, she said, we're going to finally be able to get what it is that we need, and we're going to work through the Montgomery Improvement Association. But because of the misogyny and the sexism of our moment, I know they're not going to listen to a woman. They said, well, who can we use as the face of this work? She said, we just got a new young minister that got here from Boston University. We'll make him the face of it. And the reason we know Dr. King is actually because of Joanne Robinson. So in the spirit of that, I want you to ask yourself, why do we know the stories we do? And why do we not know the stories we don't? And in whose interest is it for us to know the stories we do and not know the stories that we don't? It was in the middle of this movement that Dr. King said, if peace means accepting second-class citizenship, then I don't want it. If peace means keeping my mouth shut in the midst of injustice and evil, I don't want it. If peace means being complacently adjusted to a deadening status quo, I don't want that peace. Dr. King seemed to be living at an intersection that I think many of us are challenged to live in today, which is the intersection of what does it mean to make peace, and how do you do so in a way that lives into your greatest aspirations of the beloved community. I remember sitting several years ago with Andrew Young in a conversation, and they brought the elders along with some of us who, I love that they were calling me younger, so I leaned into that. But as we sat there, Mr. Young spoke of this moment where he said we had just got finished with doing a protest, and we were lamenting about the racism that we had experienced. He said Martin stood there in the living room of this woman's house who fed them, and he said he paused and he asked them, may I say something? And they said, go ahead, Martin, say what you got to say. And he said something provocative, Mr. Young said, which was, he told us, you know, white people are not inferior because of their racism, no more than we are superior because of our ability to spot it. He said, we were both born into an unjust story. He said, now our call is to resist racism and recognize that that will actually free these whites who are participating with racism, but we must do so in a way where we do not allow our hearts to become poisoned by the same othering, my word, not his, but the same racism, so that we can create a world that is better than the one we all inherited. I think it's a provocative call. And in this moment, to me, the question for us in building beloved community is how do we do so in a way where you do not abandon your values, but at the same time, you do not rebuild a new world where you just get to be the new white people of America's story. And that's why I believe at the heart of beloved community is really a call for radical belonging. What I call radical belonging is what it means to co-create with those you see as your other, to widen the circle of human concern. Radical belonging means that I don't just settle down with people who I'm comfortable with, but I actually build a wide enough circle for people who I most disagree with, while they may be actively working to constrict the circle itself. Now, this is a tough business.
Come on, sir.
And it's not for the easy-hearted. And because there is a Christian theme to this day, I feel like I can take some liberty to say that Jesus, the one whom Martin followed, said that anyone who wants to follow this way, the first thing they must do is deny themselves. They must take up an instrument of death and follow this way. Beloved community calls us to think about what does it mean to build a cathedral. Now, I love architecture, and I've spent some time traveling, as many of us have. I loved walking into many of these cathedrals that are 300, 400, 500 years old. And as I was learning on one trip, this particular cathedral took 250 years to complete. And I thought about the architects who got together and designed a plan that would take 250 years to finish. What kind of mind does it take to draw up a plan, to pick up hammers and nails, and to go work on something you know you will never physically step into? But your grandchildren will, and your great-grandchildren will. If Seattle is to become a place that is the expression and manifestation of beloved community, it will require some of us to begin to do work now that we will never get the opportunity to step into. But the future generations of the Emerald City will inhabit. And if we're going to think about this idea of beloved community and honoring the legacy of Dr. King, the good Reverend Dr. King, we've got to tell the truth about the matter. That everybody at his time did not like each other. The SCLC, of which Dr. King was a part of, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, did not like SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And SNCC did not like the SCLC. SNCC said the SCLC was too patriarchal and too sexist. The SCLC said that SNCC was too radical and too disruptive. SNCC didn't like CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality. They felt like they were too soft. And CORE felt like SNCC was too disruptive. And then CORE didn't necessarily like the Fellowship of Reconciliation. And the Fellowship of Reconciliation didn't as much really like CORE, because they felt that some of their practices around nonviolent training was not getting some of the honor that it deserved. What I'm holding for us is all of these institutions and organizations and networks are what gave us this room, and they did not like each other then. And what I'm saying to us now is for us to build the Seattle that we need doesn't mean that we all have to like each other, nor does it mean that we all have to agree with each other, but we must be committed to all walk in the same direction to widen the circle of human concern. Bishop Desmond Tutu, the spiritual leader of South Africa's apartheid resistance movement, he said, if you want peace, don't talk to your friends, talk to your enemies. So if we're really trying to do something more than just become the new supremacist form within this city, then the question is, Who do you need to be in relationship with? Not for the sake of unity. I'm not so sure I believe in unity. I believe in harmony. That what does it mean for us to align ourselves around the things that we have in common, with clarity about the things that we have in conflict, with a commitment to nonviolence and a commitment to work on the things that we can together, while also being committed to stay in nonviolent relationship while we have to battle it out about the things that we disagree about. This is going to require a new kind of leadership, but one that I believe that this current climate that we're all living in demands. I want to finish with this invitation because if we're going to make peace, it means we're going to have to step into some really difficult moments. This is my dad. I love this guy. He taught me everything that I know. Whenever I have the opportunity, I try to bring his stories in the room because he now has Alzheimer's and he's not as connected to his own story. But I love him because he taught me that leadership is really about making the hard decisions when they're unpopular. My dad is a Vietnam veteran. He's a part of the 173rd Airborne. And, my dad used to tell me this story growing up about how he lived in, North Carolina. Then he went up to D.C. to be a bricklayer, and then he went to Detroit. He was a part of the car business, and then he came to San Francisco to be a part of the airline business. That's why I'm from San Francisco originally. And I used to be like, man, my dad's this cosmopolitan guy. And then, several years ago, we were at IHOP, and he was like, no, I was just draft dodging, and, I was like, come on, man, you messed up the story. It was a better story, the cosmopolitan thing. But he told me, he said, no, I was trying to get away from it because my dad grew up in the rural South. He actually met Dr. King when he was 13 years old. He said, Dr. King wasn't the Dr. King you all have breakfasts about, the one that I knew. He said he used to come around to the schools and the churches. He would come into these small community spaces. He said he came to our school, brought all the students together, showed us water fountains on the front of the stage, showed us that the same water going into the colored fountain was the same water going into the white fountain. He said it was in that moment that I realized we were drinking the same water as our white counterparts. He opened up our minds. He said we became a part of the student movement. My dad was arrested alongside Dr. King, put in jail at 13 years old, and was a part of the nonviolent struggle. He said, so when they came for me and told me that I had to go be an agent of violence in Vietnam, I resisted. But he said, they came and told me when they found him in San Francisco, if you don't go to Vietnam, your brother Tom is going. But one of you is going to Vietnam. So my dad felt that he had a decision that he had to make. Either I love my brother or I stay committed to my values. And so my dad decided to go to Vietnam. And he told me, he said, those who advocate for war don't know the horrors of war. And in this moment right now, I think we have to really be rooted in this reality. He said, when we got to Vietnam, we had to do horrendous things. Things that showed up as violence to, as my dad would say, the beautiful Vietnamese people, and things that were violent to ourselves and caused deep moral injury. So one of the things we had to do was to chase out all of the Vietnamese elders and the women out of the community. And we had to burn the villages to the ground. And we were trained that if anyone came running out at you, you just would discharge your firearm. And he said this was the practice while we were there. And he says we go into one village, and as we go into this village, he says this elderly Vietnamese woman who he called Mama San comes running out to my dad. GI, 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 she says. And my dad says, for whatever reason, I didn't discharge my firearm, but I paused. He said, and I put my head down, and she whispered in his ear, Martin Luther King, know you here? Martin Luther King, know you here. He said, in that moment, she snapped me back to the South. And I realized that I actually had another decision that I didn't know was available to me in that moment. And he said, I became an unofficial conscientious objector in the middle of the Vietnam War, or as my Vietnamese relatives have taught me, the American War in Vietnam. And he said, and I realized that I was no longer going to be a threat to these people. He said, so I told all of my folks, my dad was a sergeant, so he had 8 individuals in his company. He said, I told them we're not burning any more of these villages down. We're going to walk out of here. And my dad said, and I quote, we are going to bribe the white boys in the tower with Johnny Walker Red whiskey and weed so we can get out of here. And so in the lobby as you leave, we've got baskets of whiskey and weed for everybody to... That's one love. That's one way to be loved, you know. Well, at least where I come from. I come from Oakland. I know, you know. Up here, y'all having arugula and coffee, things of that nature. I think you get the moral of the story, right? My dad, in this moment, realized that he had the capacity to do something incredibly difficult when the stakes were really high. But I actually don't believe that my father is the hero of this story. I think the shero, the heroine, is that elderly Vietnamese woman who had every reason in the world to mistrust my father, to not see his humanity, to not co-create with him. He was the agent of violence in her country. But she saw him. And because she did, I wonder if the reason I'm standing here talking to you today is because of the way she widened the circle for my father. Wow. The wrong first question in the face of this moment is, what do we need to do? The right first question is, who do we need to become? And so I want to give you these 4 invitations as you think about this year. Don't only build the Seattle for now, build the Seattle for the future. What is the cathedral that is going to require you to stand up for justice? What is the cathedral that you must build that you will not step into, but others will? How do you challenge the stories you know, but also know the stories that challenge the status quo? How do you expand your table to make room for the person that you see as your perceived other? And how do you collaborate with someone, an organization that within your mind you have said, there's no way with my values that I can hold space with? This moment is calling on us to be more than just cheerleaders for our team. But it's calling on us to be love, to create the beloved community. And I finish with this reality that if we're going to do this in the climate that we have, when relatives are being kidnapped from our communities, when people are being dehumanized, when as many black people are killed by the police in this country as they were before George Floyd and Michael Brown. If we're going to do this and find a way to bring down the brutality while humanizing people that are a part of the systems and the communities that we're seeking to reconcile, it means that we're going to have to all commit to being dreamers. And I close with this. In 1962, in Terrell County in Georgia, the Mount Olive Baptist Church had been burned down. People gathered to commemorate what had happened, had been burned down by the Klan. And Dr. King showed up to sit and be a part of it. They wanted him to speak. And so as he sat and waited for his turn to speak, there was a young 22-year-old black woman minister in a moment where they didn't want to acknowledge women in ministry. Her name was Prathia Hall. And she got up doing the invocation, and as she was praying in the middle of all this violence that they were experiencing, she began to pray, I have a dream that we will be one community. I have a dream that we will be able to reconcile the injustice that is happening around us. I have a dream that our moment will be healed. I have a dream. And as she continued to go on and go on, at the end of that service, Martin came up to Prathia Hall, and he said, Prathia, can I borrow that? And the I have a dream that we know from 1963 started in the mouth of a 22-year-old black young woman who stood up in the moment of her church being burned down. And that the only way that we were able to captivate the consciousness of this country was by Martin being willing to follow the leadership of a young 22-year-old black woman who had the truth in her belly. It challenged his norms of sexism and misogyny, and it called him into his aspirations of beloved community. And so as those who are the beloved and are thinking about this year, how can we be loved? Whether you're an educator, a pastor, a police officer, a fire safety leader, an elected official, a business person, I want you to ask yourself, not just what you should do, but who is this moment calling you to become as the beloved, to be loved? Thank you.